this month's, thank you, Allison, technical subcommittee meeting. Today, the topic as requested probably at the end of the last annual training was how do people create mailing lists or find different businesses, especially if a new rule comes out, and that way, how do we reach out to these people that we may or may not have had any contact with at all prior to that? So today we're going to pretty much go over at least my tips and tricks for doing it and how over the years I've developed mailing lists as well as the resources I use. Then Paula will talk a little bit about how they may do it at the EPA level. And after that, we should have a open for discussions like any ideas or tips or tricks that other people use. Because this particular subcommittee meeting is all about sharing ideas and ways that each group could potentially have better effect. So with that, one of the first ways that we start off with is, of course, we get something like this is from the 6X 9 metal rule that came out, and EPA will often go through and like, here are some of the NYX codes that we think are associated with a particular industry or in related to this particular rule. And a few of the rules, it's actually very specific that if you're not on this NYX list, then the rule doesn't apply to you. Most of them are suggested NYX list, and there could easily be some out there that aren't on a NYX list that a rule does apply to, but those usually are more on an individual basis. This usually captures the majority of the different groups. However, as most of us have found out over the years, and you're seeing the rule, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, good. Yeah, because I'm seeing the share screen on my other screen. It's like, wait a second, I should be sharing the one right in front of me. So, okay, that's good. But sometimes companies are misclassified. They may not be entirely aware of what NYX codes or SIC codes they're in. And that actually becomes an issue because in that case, we have a much harder time actually finding them. But this at least gives a good starting point. Now, once you have the NYX codes, you can go into a couple of different things, but let's set the NYX codes aside for just the moment. Because there are other resources that you may have within your state itself that are very specific to a particular group that you're wanting to talk to. So in this case, if I wanted to, for instance, send out something to all the underground storage tank or gasoline dispensing facilities. So in Tennessee, the underground storage tank division maintains a list that is actually available up on their website, and they keep it fairly current. And this is all the different facilities in Tennessee that are registered with underground storage tanks. And you can see there are quite a few of them. I think somewhere around, yeah. So we're into like 17,000 or so. Now, this isn't necessarily all the active facilities. So sometimes you have to take data like this and manipulate it. So we go over here, we can see that they may or may not have any active tanks. In this case, a lot of them are permanently out of use. So if you get rid of all of those, Then you start looking at the ones that are currently in use or temporarily out of service. And those are the ones that you would actually want to look at. And that's usually a much lower number. So if you want to do a mailing list out to them, it saves you a lot of no longer out there companies. And that's always going to be the issue with developing a mailing list, is just how good your data is. If it's out of date or you don't sort it well, then you're going to have a large number of missed connections. Companies that no longer exist, companies that it doesn't apply to, companies that may have completely changed. But this is at least one way. So I would first start off by looking within your own state as to what resources. This is an example for, we wanted to, if there are changes to the gasoline dispensing facility, which I did see based on today's small business bulletin from EPA, that it's up for residual risk and technical review. Hopefully there aren't any changes. One that will have some changes coming up is dry cleaners. And if you contact your dry cleaners environmental response program, or whatever it's named in your state, they should have a list, because in a lot of cases, there's a specific registry that they have to do as dry cleaners to say, we're using these solvents, and they pay a surcharge per gallon of solvent to maintain the program. And that program provides benefits on cleanup if it becomes necessary. So it's sort of like an emergency fund to help if a dry cleaner ends up with a spill, then rather than the spill cost all be on them, they've been paying into this program over the years, and that program can help them offset some of the costs. Hopefully it doesn't come to that, but it's sort of like an insurance program in that way. So now, some of you may also have, where is it? Some of you may also have different access to different databases. This right here is what is known as small Glog in Tennessee. It is essentially something that Crystal and I have access to, and we are able to look through all different companies. In some cases,
Donovan, we're seeing your email. Is that what you wanted to be showing?
No, wrong screen. That's actually I can do that. So we'll do that and then push it over there. Now you should be seeing the small Glog. This right here gets into a lot of different information about the different companies, but it is downloadable, and then you can use it to sort based on different categories, or maybe do a search for, say, sawmills, for instance, and you can potentially find the different sawmills in Tennessee. All right, in this case, and sometimes very specific. Like I said, the better your search terms, the more you get. So if you have sawmills, you get one. Sawmill, you get a few more. But of course, manipulate around doing different searches. So this honestly isn't necessarily the best way to create a list, but it does provide an opportunity. Also, if you want to send out a general email to all permitted sources, for instance, then you need to be able to work with your air pollution control division, or whichever division has a resource like this, and they may give you access to a method they have for sending out essentially an email blast. The last time we really used something like that was when we were discussing fee changes that could affect everybody that has a permit. Now, going back to that NYX search, when the Federal Register puts out something that does have a lot of different NYX, as we saw before. That makes it really easy. And you just search down, it's like, all right, this is the ones I want to put in my search terms. But what if you don't know what the NYX is? Then you will want to use a website like this one. This is the NYX.com search bar. And then you can put in your different keywords or do an SIC. So the difference between these is NYX is your North American Industrial Classification System. I find it's generally the better of the two because it's more precise. It uses about a 6-number code typically, as opposed to the standard industrial classification, which uses only a 4-digit usually. But sometimes you find that SIC codes work better than the NYX. So somebody give me an industry that they're interested in. Yes, I'm
Ready
making
mix
this in
concrete.
concrete. So here we have all the different types of concrete companies that we might want to look at. Now, one that we come up with a lot is ready mix concrete manufacturer. These are your concrete batch plants. Okay. Tony already jumped on it, Belinda. We'll get to trailers in a moment, though. So there we would write down what the SIC, the NYX code is, and we'll use it to create our mailing list, which I will show you in the next thing. But since we also had trailer manufacturers. Okay. And here we have several different varieties. So there you have to be careful about what type of trailer you're looking at. Are we looking at travel trailers, which would be like your RVs? And you also have to watch out for some of them are not manufacturers, like this is a rental and leasing. Then we have truck trailer manufacturer. In this case, I would probably say it would fall under this one. But if you click on that, you get a very clear idea of what might be in there. So you have automobile transport trailers, camper units, travel trailers, recreational. So this might actually be the type that we're looking for. And you can see here it gives a more complete listing for those. So taking this data, then we go to where we really start doing the searches. So this right here is something called Data Axle, and I access through our public library. So public resources like this are very easy to access and can provide a huge amount of data. Now, again, how well they update, I don't know. Typically, when using this, I would get a 10 to 15% return letter amount, but that's still meaning about 90 to 85% are getting through. So I should be reaching majority of people. A good example of when I used this last is when I contacted all the auto body shops. And I think I sent out about 1,500 letters and I got maybe 200 of them back. So it still worked out pretty well. Sometimes you may want to do a quick search if you want to look for a particular company, but if we're doing a mailing list, you can go under to the advanced search. And this one has the option of doing a lot of different sorting. So in this case, we're looking at keywords and we can enter in our NYX codes. So looking back at trailer manufacturers, for instance, we have 336214. And then we would go back over to our list here and we can enter that in. And we have the options here are searching by all SICs, all NYX, which is what we're looking for, or by primary. So in this case, since it's probably falling under the 6X rule, they need to be primarily engaged in one of those processes. So that's where you would want to do either primary or all of them. If you want to find somebody that simply does it, you would use all of it. If you want to see somebody whose primary job is that, then you look under the primary. So, and as you can see, sometimes they add a couple extra letters for further refinement. So in this case, we would want that one. Okay. So that should be sufficient. Then we can update our count. So we probably got a little bit too narrow on this because we're only seeing 535 in the entire US. But that's the next thing you do is narrow it down by your state. So since Melinda asked, there we go. So now we're looking at by Idaho. So based on our NYX search, there are 19 companies that do trailer manufacturing in the state of Idaho. You can also, since we only work with small businesses, you can further define it down by those with 100 or less employees. And they only knocked out 2 large businesses. So once you finally get refined down to where you want it, then you can review your results. So these are the different trailer manufacturers based on our search in Idaho. And then you can download this list, and this becomes your mailing list because you can get details for it. This will minimum have your mailing address. It may also have occasionally emails, but not commonly. If you click on any one of them, you can find out further details about that company, which potentially you could use to thin them out based on the income levels as per the Small Business Administration definition of a small business. Usually I don't bother with that one though. And sometimes you can find out a lot of information about the company. Let's see here. So let's try the other one because I may have defined that too narrowly, but let's step back to Tony's. And we determined that 327, 320. All right. So start up a new search. In this case, we'll use all NYX. So this means if they're a secondary producer of it and they do something else as their primary, it'll show up. So 122 ready-mix concrete manufacturers in North Carolina that have 100 or fewer employees. Now, in a few cases, you will come across companies like, for example, here we have a lot of Argos USA, and they may actually be part of a larger corporation. But individually, each facility may still count as a small business. Yeah, Tony.
Oh, they're just huge international. They're everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. So those are ones that you gotta weigh. It's like, do I deal with them on an individual facility basis and still count as a small business? Or do I count them as really a large business that is outside the scope of ones that I should be handling because they have the resources to do it on their own? Similar to Chandler Concrete. But we, for example, look at a particular one, then in that location, they have 95 employees. So technically they're squeezing in there right at the border. But as Tony pointed out, overall, it's like here might be the main one. I don't know. Yeah, that one has 5. That may be an administrative location. But this is some of the tools that I've used over the years to develop the different mailing lists for when EPA issues out a new rule. In particular, they have a NYX list, and then I'll go through the list and determine who, based on the NYX code, might fall into that. And when I don't have a state level list that may have more up-to-date information based on actual registrations or money sent in some cases, then this is what my fallback is. Research what the NYX is, or in some cases the SIC, and then make a mailing list. And this also is something that allows you to determine how many businesses you may have in your state. For example, let's pick a random one here. So I saw Emily there a moment ago. So let's see here. Minnesota. All right. And we're looking at just the number of employees. So based on this, Emily should have about 250,000 small businesses in Minnesota of one type or another. Now you can use the major industry group to thin it down to those that might have environmental issues. Something else is up here, you look at the record type, whether they're verified, where whoever put the database together actually checked with them. But sometimes when you get smaller businesses, you want to also include the unverified, and that does introduce some inaccuracies in your database, but it also, I think, has a better chance of catching those that may or may not have been verified or maybe truly small businesses, and therefore maybe not have been reached out to or otherwise checked by the database. It may be that they're pulling records from business license or something. But these are some ways that you can turn. So it's like, yeah, we include the unverified. In Minnesota, you notice that it jumps up to 767,000. So if Emily wanted to use this list, may or may not want to use the unverified. It depends on what they're looking for. So that's just an example. So any questions right now?
Tony, or sorry, not Tony. Donovan, this is Jeremy. Hey, I have a question. This data axle looks like it's reference USA. I don't know who bought who. How do you log into that? Because I see, I'm trying to do the same thing in another window. I see you can log in directly from Data Axle's website with your library stuff, or do you log in through your Nashville Library's account?
Yeah, I log in through my Nashville Library account.
Okay, because I'm trying to do the same thing with a Philadelphia Free Library, and I'm getting a lost file 404 error, so something's going on. But that's pretty interesting though, because I occasionally get like Dun & Bradstreet's Hoover's database, and I do something very similar, but it's a very costly subscription to get to do small business analysis. So from my understanding, it used to be Reference USA, and Data Axle appears to have either bought it or they rebranded. This is our Nashville Public Library main login. Come here under Education Research and Databases, and then just scroll down to the Data Axle. And then I'm currently already logged in, so it jumped immediately to this. But here's some of the databases available through the Data Axle, and I typically only use the US Businesses one, and that brings us back to our search terms. Some libraries may not have access to it, but I think this is a common enough one that there hopefully might be one
available to you, or it might be something to suggest to your public library. And this provides a great research tool for lots of people, not simply just us.
Yeah, I certainly agree. Thanks for that resource, because my experience with Hoovers is that they're not 100% perfect, but they get you pretty darn close to what you're looking for, and the information's pretty valuable. So, but free resources are obviously free, so that's very helpful to have options to look at.
Yeah, and I have heard the suggestions of the Dun and Bradstreet Index as well. I'm aware that they do have a really good database. It's not one I've necessarily had access to, so I haven't really used that much. So Tony?
Well, I was going to say, we used Info USA, Reference USA, Data Axle, it's all the same, for auto body shops when the rule first came out. And we had meetings with a couple different people that have databases like this, and they came in and they did their pitch. And Info USA had a pretty good pitch, and they said how they call people and all that kind of stuff. But before I could sign up and pay the money to access it properly, I was able to sign in with my personal library card. And I do think that not every library has that. It's an option. It's probably something that they pay for, just like they have it for ancestry.com and stuff like that too, where sometimes you can go into one of their computers that's at the library and do really good research that you can't do at home without paying for it. But I did want to say, I was a little surprised to learn that the state of North Carolina has a library, and probably every state does. And because I'm a state employee, I am allowed to have a state library card, and the state library card gets me better access. And that's one little trick you might want to try.
Yep. So the majority of ones, it might actually be through the Tennessee Secretary of State. So in that way, they should have potentially direct access to business records, because a business, a lot of them should register with your Secretary of State as a business, and then it would show up in the library and archives. And actually here in Tennessee, we just had a whole new building built for our library and archives. And as you see here from ours, we do have businesses there and a lot of other things. So I haven't really explored this a lot, because I did have access to the data axle through our public library. But as Tony pointed out, this may be a completely free resource that is already in state, wherever you are, that as a state employee, you should have access to. And they may even have more accurate information than, say, the data axle. Okay, so with me showing off how I have done things, I'm going to turn it over to Paula, and she's going to speak a little bit on some of the federal techniques, as well as I think some of the limitations they have for some of their searches. But perhaps this might give us an idea of how EPA determines which companies to reach out to, what research they do. But we'll pretty much find out. So I'll turn it over to Paula.
Great. Thank you, Donovan. Let me see if I can share my screen here. Okay. So can you all see my slide?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So I think Donovan did a great job of giving a much more detailed analysis than I'm going to give here. I wanted to just offer a very high level understanding of what we do here at EPA in terms of outreach and engagement. And I'm probably not the expert to give for some of these different, I went by program office really, but I think I'm pretty adept at giving like a broad overview of what in the agencies is being done in terms of reaching out to small businesses. So I was just going to offer to just talk a little bit about what I do and kind of what I cover here in the ASBO program. Then go on to just the OSDBU wide office, because there is another side of my office, the Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization, that does a lot of outreach and engagement with small business, but it's procurement focused. We have an EPA Small Business Advocacy Chair, and that's located in the Office of Policy. And so they have a huge process in terms of engaging with small entity representatives for the small business advocacy review panels. Also, I cover a little bit about what I know the program offices do when they're writing rules. And then lastly, EPA's Office of Enforcement and Compliance Assurance. So I know that, a lot of my role here in ASBO, or as the ASBO, is to engage with small businesses, to partner with you all in the States, with the EPA regional staff, and just really serve as a conduit of information. We say often that word, informational liaison, a small business advocate, or an advocate for a fair process for small business here at EPA. And so a big way that we do that is either, my support directly to those that contact me, or through our hotline and through our email. We provide referrals and assistance and resources. I actually did a little plug here by linking to a new compliance assistance resource list and kind of outline page on our website. I also provide coaching and solution problem solving support. And that's not just for the small businesses, but I also provide that when there is a rule being developed here at EPA and they recognize that they need to engage with small businesses. So I try to help kind of think through some of those problems, like Donovan was saying, thinking through the NYX codes, what kinds of businesses are going to impact them. And I'll talk a little bit more about, how we do that for the program offices. But, the three main pillars, and I just wanted to include this because, so the three main pillars of being an ombudsman are to be independent, impartial, and confidential. And so when I think about that, I have worked with some offices where they were really interested in getting like a small business contact list from us. And because of that confidentiality, when you're serving as an ombudsman, there is an expectation that that when a small business contacts us, that we do not share that information, that it's kind of a safe place that they can come and make a complaint or have concerns. Sometimes the business wants to be, supported and have, somebody to go to bat for them. So they're not looking for confidentiality, but we do protect our database. We do collect that information, but we don't typically share that with others. And sometimes we don't always get the detailed, call in and full name of somebody that calls to access the ombudsman support. In the OSDBU office, as I mentioned, procurement is the big driving force for the larger office. And, that has a number of different things with statutory requirements and where the agency really looks to OSDBU in terms of procurement, meeting some of these small business administration goals. And so here's just a list of some of the different ways that our office supports outreach engagement activities with the small business community. So SBA does have a dynamic small business search database, and I did hyperlink these. So if you want me to send those to you, I can, the slides. SAM.gov is another resource that these recently were updated, and I don't typically use these. These are more something that my other side of the office would use, but there was an older name for these, but they've been recently in the last few years updated. FedBiz Ops is another one that businesses will go and they actually register their name and information so that the federal procurement process, we have a way to search for them. And then EPA actually has its own small business vendor profile database, same concept, where a small business would actually register their information to show that they are interested in doing business with EPA. And so when, as an office, when we do some outreach on an office level that includes any type of business, whether they be procurement. This would mostly serve procurement needs, but we would use these resources to do some sort of mass mailer and outreach event. For those that are familiar with the small business advocacy review panels that happen, and for those that aren't aware, they come into play when there is an EPA rulemaking that we know is going to have a significant impact on small business. And that requirement came out of the SBEAPs requirements. And our Office of Policy Small Business Advocacy Chair actually leads that project or that effort for the agency. And so I listed them here. We work with the Small Business Administration's Office of Advocacy on that. And I know many of you are familiar with that office. We've had them join us for several different trainings and presentations in the past, as well as the Office of Regulatory, Office of Management and Budgets, Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs. So it's those three agencies work together, and they call out small entity representatives to provide to sit on the panel and to provide recommendations. And the way that they do that, I was really interested because I worked in the Office of Policy in this office for about 6 months, and I oversaw a panel, and there wasn't a great process for how they bound SIRs. They always seem to end up coming around and getting enough, but I think a lot of that was in support from the Small Business Administration. They are very well versed in a lot of the rulemakings that are on the docket and were very helpful in getting us our SIRs. They also, the advocacy chair will put out an announcement in the Federal Register as well as on our website, offering for volunteers for small entity representatives. So it's kind of a combination process. It takes some time, working with different trades. We typically don't want to have a trade association sit as a SIR, but we recommend that they work with their members to nominate a SIR to serve on these panels. And in the program offices, so those program offices that are looking to do rulemakings, they're kind of learning as they go. A lot of times these rules take years. Usually they have a pretty senior person that's working on it, but some of the folks in the office that are supporting that rule writer are lower level staff that are just kind of getting their feet wet. And one of the big ways that they get some of that understanding in terms of what businesses might be impacted by their rulemaking is to work with EPA's National Center for Environmental Economics, which serves as a consultant to the agency. They link science and policy. They obviously do a lot of our environmental and economic policy research, as well as they help us connect with outside experts and, kind of giving us the data and information we need in the rulemaking process. And so a lot of the times they will give us some analysis on what types of industry are impacted either by NYX Codes. They can kind of break it down by what type, how big are the businesses, large, small, and that really does compile into the determination on whether a regulation will have a significant impact on a number of small entities. And I know for many of us, we've seen that some of these rulemakings, they're able to certify that it will not have a significant impact. And then later down the line, we say, it seems like it does have an impact. So it's not an exact science. And I think that I've shared that I think the agency could really improve on our outreach and how we get some of this information, especially in the rulemaking process. So I'm really curious to kind of have an open discussion about what you all do here in the States. The other things that we do, like I mentioned before, using the Federal Register to make announcements about rulemakings that are coming up, comment periods, just trying to get that information that can come from the public or from small businesses themselves during the public comment period. And of course, engaging with trade associations where they can help us filter, to specific members, sometimes set up meetings to have listening sessions, and that's something that I've been reached out to support. And I've included you all in some of those things as well, especially recently from the Office of Air and with Rhonda, to just, use the value that the small business environmental assistance programs in the states have, and working directly with small businesses. So it's not quite working directly with the small businesses, but hearing from you all, I think is helpful as well. And then also just relying on communication and contacts lists that have been used in the past for previous similar rulemaking. So it's really kind of piecing things together. There's not this solid and standardized process that we use as far as I'm aware. And then lastly, EPA's Office of Enforcement and Compliance Assurance. And from my understanding, of course, the EPA, we do some site visits and some analysis on a federal level, but then I know we also work closely with the states to do some of that site inspection and enforcement work. And so I think, I listed here just a number of the different databases that are available where you can do some sort of facility query and get like a list of different types of facilities in your state or across the country. So you can kind of go through that and find different ways to kind of search for businesses, small businesses in whatever type of, I think they don't always use NYX codes in these databases. They do a lot in the procurement databases. These they will do more based on the different like air, waste, water. So it's nice to have a kind of a variety of ways to search for these different facilities. That was all I had. I don't know if that was helpful at all, but it's just on a very high level what we're doing here at EPA. It's really not, I think everyone has their process, but it still could be improved. And I think that, relying on these databases can be good and has a lot of benefit, but we're also open to suggestions and ways to improve. So any questions?
And follow up on that, there are two things that in particular I feel that Paula noted that as we're doing this, we certainly need to keep in mind. It's like, even when we're using publicly available databases, or even using a enforcement database effectively, whatever mailing list we develop will be confidential. So even using a division's own data, it's like we can't necessarily turn around and say, here's what we were looking at. And sometimes I do run into that. But the other thing is, Paula noted the central data exchange, which, as we know, several different rules require reporting to that. Something that different groups can do is ask to be a state reviewer, and they'll start getting a lot of emails as people will enter that. But it does provide you a way of going in and looking at who has submitted or what they've submitted. Potentially, if somebody needs help with how to submit their reports, or it might also be a way, it's like, here's everybody that has submitted, and here's some changes that might be coming up. And that provides another resource for creating a mailing list or a database of yourself to reach out to people.
Yep, I agree. There's a lot of different ways to layer the information or to get up a different list. And I know I'm not covering everything here. I'm certainly not the expert, especially in the different program offices. I'm sure they have their own specific databases, but that was at a very high level.
Yep. And a lot of the drawbacks to a degree of using a lot of these databases is you may not get electronic means of contacting them. And you're most likely going to get mailing addresses, which means the sending out the letter, that especially small businesses may see what came in. It's like, oh my God, I got a letter from the state, or especially if they get it from Paula, it's like, got a letter from the federal government, and they're afraid to even open it or touch it for maybe longer than they should. So, but at the same time, it's like, there's, as Tony especially, and I'll get to you in a moment, has developed a good relationship with small businesses. They're more willing to like, oh, I got a letter from Tony. Let's see what he has to say. So, Tony, what do you have to say today?
Oh, I don't know, not that much, but I will say that OAQPS, as a program office, they do have some way of getting some pretty good lists. The problem being they don't want to share it with us or anybody, and which probably makes sense, but it does make it challenging. Like, I think their recent proposal for auto body, they said there were 47,000 effective facilities, but they won't let us know what those 47,000 are. And they will share their old list. So like when they first came out with the rule, you can get that. It's probably in the docket, I think it is, but the current stuff you can't get. So that's a little bit of a problem, but. And I do have to say, one thing I hear a lot from small businesses is that they despise being on lists. And so I guess my question is, are they crazy? And I think the answer is no, because we find that you get on one list and then it's a way to find you for something else.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I'm sure the procurement databases, they're looking for business, and well, I mean, these are different types of businesses than maybe what a lot of the small businesses that have to comply with rulemaking. But I know that we do search those databases a lot to kind of compile and create lists. So they're getting bombarded, but they did offer up they registered their business. So yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a catch-22 in some cases. Like, you got to put some information out there sometimes in order to do business, but that potentially makes it in lots of different areas. And there are certain companies out there that do a lot of GIS work, and they mine Echo or Cedri or whatever. They actually go through about 30 to 40 different lists out there. So, and they sort of collate it together, and then they sell that data based on their interface to make it easier for anybody to like look up, like, all right, here's this company in this location. They showed up on the TRI. Here's their TRI list. Here's their Echo information. And then depending on whether they want to, they can do an EJ overlay. And in some cases, those are just sort of collecting all the information together and making it a graphical interface. And most of that information is publicly available in some shape, form, or fashion.
You know, I was wondering, do you all use Echo to help you kind of see maybe where businesses in your state or region are getting dinged or called out for not meeting some of their enforcement requirements?
I just used it last week. I get a notice from Echo of any smaller synthetic miner that has an air violation. And it just comes once a week. And I look over the list, and I was looking over the list, and I recognized an old client and saw that they got dinged. So I called them up. I was like, what's going on? How can I help? Because they actually don't have a permit anymore, but they got a violation for not operating their bag filter as well as they could. So.
Does anybody else?
I do not, but it has its options.
Yeah, I mean, a while ago, I was working with OECA, and I sat down with the woman that has managed the Echo database, and I got a tutorial from her, and I was thinking, like, this could be a good presentation for the states, for you all. And I don't remember if I set that up or not, if we did like a tutorial from the Echo program. Does that ring a bell at all?
Yeah, I think I do remember one. Mark?
Okay.
That sounds like a good idea. I don't remember, sorry. It would be great if they maybe could work with us as a group of small business assistance providers. Assuming they have the time and the willingness to maybe just go through some examples, much like what was done today.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. If that's of interest, I know I could help facilitate that for a future technical subcommittee. They could give a tutorial of how you can kind of synthesize the data to pull out what you're looking for.
Well, yeah, I'm open for it. For now, the technical calendar is a bit dry after May, so I don't know if I'm doing a bad job, but I think there might be one or two other irons in the fire. So yeah, anything like this that, especially if it could maybe draw the interest of other states that may not normally participate in the technical calls.
Yeah, well, let me know if you guys are interested, and I can.
I'm interested in it.
Yep.
Unless there's any strong objections from anyone else participating on this call. Jeremy.
Yeah, I was just going to answer Paula's question. I mean, at least my own experience in Pennsylvania, well, myself individually, I more use Echo reactively. If we get a call from a business that's been inspected by Region 3, is gotten enforcement action against them, I'll dig up that facility in Echo to see what the history was, what was going on. But also in Pennsylvania, we have our own state database called EPCRA, and I would say in my many years of doing compliance assistance, that's almost reactive. Every time we get a call from a business or a request for assistance, we check out the business, check out EPCRA, see what's going on with them. So I think it's a good habit just to check any of the compliance assistance databases that are available to your state or through ECO, through EPA's database. The other thing I was going to add just to the general conversation with all these databases and stuff, it's big money. These companies that do the research and put these together, it's big money to them. Because I remember I'm at a university, and the librarian that was doing stuff for the business school keyed me in on a conversation. There was another database called IBIS World, and the salesperson was giving a pitch to myself and a few faculty there. And as she was explaining the process, how they put all that information together, there's somebody in like Manhattan in New York City that's basically doing all this research. It's big money to them. So yeah, as I think Donovan said, there's these companies or individuals, researchers, they're mining this data to put that all together. And again, I mentioned my experience with Hoover's and Dun & Bradstreet these subscriptions are not cheap. So anytime you can use a publicly available database, either through your state government or some of us that are SBEAPs that are based at universities are also an excellent resource to tap into. Or if you're an alumni of a particular university, you might have alumni access as well to tap into, wherever you went to school at your local college or your state college. So that's another option to check out as well. I've done that in a pinch before. I've used my alumni credentials to log in and actually you look at Hoover's and stuff. So figured I'd throw that out there. Yeah.
I was just curious how much is really expensive for access to the database.
If you call them cold call, if you're just Joe Schmo off the street, it was like $2,000-$3,000 for an annual subscription.
Wow. I'm
located at the SBDC network, so a few of the individual SBDCs kind of grouped together, so we got like a group discount. And I want to say the most recent subscription was like $1,800 for an annual subscription. But with the price of inflation and that price went up. I remember we did not renew our subscription, I want to say last fiscal year, and they were going to increase it by like 5 or 10%. And they tack on taxes and fees and all that jazz. So if you're on a limited budget, you know, trying to, you know, enroll in like a Hoover's or something else, it can be costly. So.
Yeah, I guess I'm just thinking, and I would definitely need to double check into this. I don't know how it'd work, but I wondered if the grant could help with that subscription, if that's something that, you know, everybody in the program could access to help with their outreach. That might be something to look into.
Yeah, that's certainly a possibility. Though at the same time, as we pointed out, there are several free options out there, or as you pointed out, there's several federal options with some of the information. And some of those federal options are where the different data miners will get their information from.
Yeah.
I mostly know about one because I had the booth right next to him and could watch his demonstrations as he was doing and talking about how it's like we're pulling from like 40 to, I think he had as many as 60 different databases he was pulling from. So, and there it's like somebody has collected the data or the data has been required and at a publicly available, it's like, and then they just use that public information, or they have their own subscriptions and then they coalesce it and put it into a new graphical format. And that's where their real income comes from, is how do you present it and how do you access it? And the easier you can do a search or an access or make it graphical, that appeals to more people, it seems. So.
Can I ask just one last thing about, so when you are looking to do outreach, is, you know, on a particular rulemaking, is it in an effort to see if you know, is this just kind of across the board training, information, offer to come and do a site visit? What's kind of the array of things that you're looking to do?
Right. So in a lot of cases, it will certainly vary. Sometimes when a new rule comes out, I'll do a search based on the NYX just to see how many there are, to see if we even need to take action. If there's like 20, I may just individually call them up and tell them, hey, there's this new rule coming out you need to be aware of. It was more than that, then that's when a mailing goes out, but it's mostly to inform them that a new rule has come out that they need to be aware of. And then as things have developed, like, for example, for notice of initial notifications or notification compliance status, like, all right, these are requirements that they need to do. So that's usually my next step. And then after that, potentially work with associations, do some workshops, or at least offer to do one. And beyond that, it's like more individuals. So any other states want to chime in on this?
Pretty much covered it.
Yeah, I could just add in, because I do a lot of this. I look at like, just look at the business to verify they are a small business, because we have the state definition of 100 employees or less, and then there's also the SBA definition. And I do say NYX code instead of NYX or whatever, but that's a different regional interpretation of how we say that. But yeah, we also assist the state as well with doing some of the proposed rulemakings as well. If there's a particular air quality proposed rulemaking and they just want to get a ballpark feel for how many small businesses or businesses that are out there, we try to help them figure out what the universe is as to who it may apply to, and then we can, you know, further refine those analyses and figure out, you know, yes, this is a better option, because, you know, a rulemaking might come out and it could affect several thousand businesses. And then it's like, well, how many are actually small, or how many are not a Title V source. So how many are area sources versus what's a small business. So there's a lot of various little things that you can refine and play around with. But yeah, I feel like it's not a perfect science. And I feel like that's what we've been discussing, is that you have to rely on multiple sources. And then even still, you're not going to capture the entire universe, and that you still have to put out requests for public comment and get that actual feedback from small businesses to say, you know, hey, you're just looking at a database, but you're not hearing how this is actually going to affect my day-to-day operations. So,
yeah. And something Jerry says, like, sometimes you just use these searches to get a general idea of what's the number out there. And that may actually influence how the enforcement divisions treat it. For example, in Tennessee, when we had so many gas stations, and majority of those are going to be small businesses, because of the approximately 2,500 individual owners, easily over half of them only owned a single station. So we're not talking about these big corporations like, say, MAPCO, for instance, which owned about 250 stations. We're talking a lot of individuals, but because of the sheer number, our air pollution controls, like, we can't permit all these. There's too many of them. That would be all we do as an entire division, is permit gas stations. So instead, they developed the permit by rule in our case. So we pretty much directly adopted the federal rule with minor changes to prevent backsliding under, I think it was the 110L determination. I can't remember. And now it's pretty much just a registry program, and we had not had that in our state before. Now we've also done that for auto body, because there's about 1,400 of those in the state, and emergency engines under the RICE rule, because who knows how many those are.
You know, we've been talking. Oh, go ahead, Jeremy. Finish up.
I was just going to say, the one thing to be careful at when doing, I'm just speaking generally, is, you know, what may be considered a small business in one of these databases might not actually be that, because there's a lot of inventive businesses, or businesses that know how to kind of like play the game. So they might have sub-parent companies or ultimate parent companies. It's that especially happens in like oil and gas companies. When Marcellus Shale was big in PA, and a lot of companies from like Texas or whatever would come up to drill, they would, you know, have a side business that was like mom and pop's drilling or something like that, but they were actually owned by Chevron or something like that. And that actually also happens with some, you know, some large nuclear power plants, or actually coal power plants in PA. You know, some of the criteria, what's a small business by SBA standards, might be like several hundred employees or 1,000 employees, or the annual revenue can be a million. And what's in the database might say this is technically a small business, but, you know, on the looks of things, it's like, what small business can actually own a coal-fired power plant? So it's, yeah, you actually have to use your own judgment on some of the calls as well, or you know, with the data. So it can be, we can talk about this all day. I apologize. So I'll hand it back to you, Tony.
Well, I was just going to say, we were talking mostly about straightforward means of finding out some of this information. And sometimes you need to get a little sneaky. And I mean, I can give you an example. Ethylene, well, the assistant administrator for air wanted me to get an ethylene oxide sterilizer on the SBAR panel. I didn't know any. I didn't know how to find them or anything like that. And I was able to determine that you have to be permitted through the FDA. And so I did go to FDA's website and found a list through there. So that's one way. But I also called the trade association for ethylene oxide sterilizers. And this is something that we have available to us because we're non-regulatory and confidential. You can usually talk to a person, and those relationships will yield things that databases won't. And I was able to talk to one of the guys on the board for the association, and he was convinced that I was a good guy. I was only trying to help, and I wasn't going to turn anybody in or do anything like that. And he told me exactly who to call in different states, and got me to the X immediately without going through a bunch of gyrations or things like that. So I find that lots of times, especially with the trade associations, if we can use our non-regulatory status to convince them that we're good guys and we're just here to help, that it can go a long way.
So that actually is a really great note to end on, Tony, as we wrap up today. So overall, there's a lot of different opportunities out there for getting your data. You sometimes have to go sort it out to make sure the data is correct, or at least as close as you want it to. And there's a lot of publicly available ones, but sometimes there are ways that we can use our relationships to find even better data, especially if it's a specific group. Sometimes they have better database than anything else that we can find, or there are different end runs around it because some other group may have registered, like with the FDA or TRI, that doesn't necessarily show up right off. But overall, there's lots of ways of doing it. But the end result is finding ways to outreach and get the information to the businesses that need it. So with that, we'll wrap up today. Next month, I believe Michigan is doing a presentation. Jennifer has lined up one of her engineers to talk about, I can't remember the exact topic, but Chuku, I'm probably butchering his name, so sorry about that. We'll discuss, I think, water issues, but look forward to seeing y'all next month.
Actually, it'd be air toxic screening at the property line.
Okay, that's it. I can't remember exactly what it was.
Which I'm very grateful to Nancy, because she brought up something or forwarded an email, and then it piqued my memory. I had recalled that Michigan had a program regarding modeling. I didn't know if they were still doing it, and apparently they were. And so then I said, oh, by the way, could you speak on that topic or have someone that speak on that topic? So yeah, sometimes it's just dumb luck falling into something that I believe or assume will be of benefit to most, if not all, of the SBAP community.
All right, excellent, Mark. All right, see y'all next month.
Next month,
Bye.
take care.
Bye.
Thank
Thank you
you.
both, Paula and Donovan.
No problem.
Thanks.
Thanks.